Hello, Chip GT here, and this is part 2 of episode 6, where we're going to go into the script and the code for VPX, and we are going to be adding in all the code that we need for the VR table. If you want to follow along, you have to have completed everything in episode 1, because we have set up a whole bunch of filters and collections. We're going to be calling out components by part name, so make sure everything is named, and you'll be able to follow along with me and fully understand what I'm about to do. The VPX software is based off of Visual Basic, and if you have never done any coding before whatsoever in your life, I've got several resources for you. The first one is to use the community and reach out to people that can help you. The second one is look at the example table. There is a lot of good information in here, and they basically break down all the different sections of the code in the example table with this Z lettering, and you can find almost anything that you want based off of this example table and get it into your code. If you have never done any coding before, there's some good instructions here for how to do coding and the coding structure and some of the standards to follow, the spacing, capitalization, so on and so forth. So if you've never done anything like that, this kind of helps you a little bit. And then if you are still uncomfortable with doing any of that, you can go the route that I went through ChatGPT. And you can use ChatGPT, and don't think that you're cheating or anything else like that. Use it. It is a good resource, and it is like talking to somebody who actually knows how to code. So all you have to say, like what I said here, is I want to go and create coding for my drain lanes, and it just went and gave me all kinds of code and instructions. And I said I wanted a sound. I said I wanted, it to play the light to blink so fast and whatnot, and it regurgitated all the code that I would need, all the different subroutines to detect whether it was hit or not, to get the light to blink and everything else. And then at the very bottom, it tells you where to put the various pieces of code into your code so that you know what to do. And as you can tell, I have used this quite a bit as I scroll down through everything. I've also used it for troubleshooting when doing some of the VR coding. I had an issue where I was trying to get the VR room to turn on and off. It said, hey, I'm getting this particular error in the code, and it straight up told me, check your collections, and something might be off based off of the error that you're getting. And I went back to the collection, and lo and behold, I had the timers in there, and that's what caused me to have hours of a headache trying to figure it out. I went to ChatGPT and figured it out in like 10 seconds. Use this resource. Don't feel ashamed by using it. I've used it, and it is a wonderful resource. All right, when getting started with your code, I kind of shrink down everything over here because I know that I'm going to be looking at the script, and all you got to do is click the script button here, and I popped up this code right next to it. This may be a little bit hard for you to read, so I'm just going to kind of briefly explain this. I highly recommend that you download my example of my table and take a look at what I've done, and you can copy everything that I have in here. Moving forward in all of my videos, I'm going to be putting the links to all my videos in the code so that if you have any questions, you have a full episode history right here for you. I have, I call out that the name of this is Project Snow Day. It's by me and by Vpin Wizardry, which is a collection of different people. And then right below all of this information, I have all the credits for everybody who has worked on this or any code that I have pulled from somebody else. You really need to do this, otherwise you're going to get shunned by the community. Everybody who has contributed towards the game rules, and then I developed the game models. And then there's some other coding in here that I have done, but I haven't called myself out yet. I probably also need to put ChatGPT in here and make sure we get all the credits where credit is due. All right. After you've gotten your first little bit of coding, this is called your header, done, you want to make a section called player options. And the player options, when people come into your table, this is the various settings that they can select and change on command. I don't have all of the player options that I'm going to have available in here yet, but I do have like free play, turn it on and off. That's set up. If you have a real tilt bob, yes or no. I saw in another table that there's outlane difficulty, there's pegs that can be moved, and I was like, ooh, I want to have that. So you have a setting of hard, medium, and easy right here. I don't have the code in here yet. I just have this set up for now. I will add this later. I also have a placeholder for when we do fleep sounds later on. I just have it all commented out because it's not correct yet. So I just added this in here. And then we have our VR options, and for the VR options, what I have is the VR room choice of off, the SASTI room, or the minimalist room. So by choosing 0 is off, 1 is the super room, 2 is the minimalist room. And then I have, this is custom code by me, the VR Backbox choice of either being the full DMD as 0 or being a normal DMD of 1. And that changes what options are displayed. Then we have some audio volume levels in here. This is also going to be set up later on. I haven't got that done yet. And then I was thinking about having service keys to have a really cool user interface that I'm going to custom build from scratch. And I just have those keys laid out here, but I want them off. I don't want somebody to accidentally do something. I have this set up so that it knows how to render the room, or based off of how you load the software. So if you're in desktop mode, it'll go to desktop mode. If you have VPX VR set up, it'll go to the VR room choice of your choosing. From there, we have our framework variables. So I have a big section for framework options, and then we have the framework variables. So this is like your ball size. This, you know, a bunch of other things will be called out here later on, but we're not there yet. Then I have the DOF controller set up. Eventually, we're going to get to DOF links. I didn't want to import anything because I don't know if it's working just quite yet. And then we have our table initial settings. This is like when you go to launch the table, these are the initial settings that the table needs to be configured for. Like if track mode is on, the number of balls in the tray, you know, all of that. That's going to be defined later on. And then we have our key inputs. All right. So this is where we're going to see our first change for some of the VR code. And this is more for if you're using the, if you want your plunger to move, if you want your buttons to move, things like that. So we have our information here for key down. So whenever a key is pushed down, it's going to do the following. So I have the plunger key is pushed. If your VR room is greater than 0, then it will start the timer and turn off another timer. If left flipper down, we have the VR room. It will move the flipper button X position from one position to another position, and I have it being moved in increments of 5, which is about the size of a button being pushed in. Same thing for the right flipper button, same thing for the start flipper button, but instead of moving the X position, which is left and right, we're moving the Y position, so I'm going to have it go -5 when it's pushed down. And then we have the tilt keys, we have manual ball control. This is nice for when you're doing some editing here. And then we have what happens when the key is let go. So when you push the button in, it goes in, you want it to come back out, right? So same thing with the plunger. We have the timers called out here, and these timers are going to have a subroutine later on in the code, and that's where all the functions for the plunger coming in and out is going to be. So we're going to get to that in a little bit. Start button, you know, it goes back to normal position. There's two things here for the start button. We have the button itself right here, and I've done my best to actually call out what these things are and what we're trying to get it to do here off to the side. So it's going to move the button back to its home position, and then there's an overlay on top of the button that says start. It's almost like a decal that's on top of the button, and that has to move. It's its own separate thing, so I move that with the button so that it looks like it's moving all together. And then with the flipper button, we say return the flipper button back to its original position, and this is the positional information of where it is located, so it's moving it back to that original position. Yours might be different because I'm using a wide body, and you might be using a standard body size. So this is all based off of that particular position where you originally have it set. So over here off to the side, I've got that information for you. Same thing with the right flipper button goes back to where it needs to go. And then we have some manual ball controls to move it around with some arrow keys. And then what happens when the drain is hit. And then some sound effects for the plunger, the ball getting launched into the plunger. For the GI lighting, I've already done this in a previous video, but I never really talked about it. This is calling the GI lights group. All right. So on your table, if you have general illumination lights that you have set up, you just want to make sure that they are bunched together in the collection, and this will turn all the GI lights on. Next up is the slingshot animations. And then we have the shadows by, and I'm going to pronounce his name wrong, Ninuzu. I think Ninuzu. He did a lot of the shadow work for the balls. He's done a lot of shadow work for the flippers, so I just used that. I have some basic sound functions, but keep in mind this is all going to change when we do Fleep. So pay no attention to that for now. So we're just going to skip through. Then I have JP's rolling ball sounds. This is not going to change when we do the update. And then we have our sound collections for the different targets. This is where it will, you can have a collection of different sounds for different targets being hit. This is going to 100% change when we go to do Fleep. All right. I'm just going to keep scrolling down. Next, we have our conditions for a start and end game, the Ultra DMD scripting, if I'm going to use that, the pinup activity, backglass, the high scores, attract mode, scoring functions, ball functions and drains, ball save and launch, different table variables, game starting and resetting, secondary hit events, kickbacks, ball locks, scoring functions, modes, bumpers, flipper lanes. I'm going to have a character select screen, the different wizard modes, some utilities for the ball finder. So if the ball gets stuck, it'll go through a finding process, different flashers. And then at the very end, this is where all of that extra VR code is so that we can get things up and working smoothly. So first we have our backbox choice. And what I'm saying here is that I'm creating a grouping of backbox things. And then if the backbox choice is greater than 0, then we're going to have it be the full DMD. And then if it is choice number 1, then we say turn the full DMD off and turn the normal DMD on. And then if none of those, if it's something other or somebody put in a negative value or something like that, it's going to turn both of them off just to give you an indication that something is not set right. Then we have the VR mode, which is very similar to what we did for the backbox mode. Same thing. VR things, if the VR room is greater than 0, then we are going to turn on the pin cab high. So we want the pin cab high. All the cabinet settings are going to be turned on for the high-end table. If you don't want the high-end table, you're just going to change it to just pin cab or whatever you named it. This is the collection name. It's very important you understand. This is the collection name. All right. If the VR room is set to 1, then we're going to have the extreme version of the table turned on and the minimalist items turned off. If it's room 2, then we're going to have the minimal stuff turned on and the VR stuff turned off. And then if somebody has turned on a setting that is not correct, like they have gone with a negative number or beyond 2, we are going to basically say turn everything off. And then if in desktop mode, we want to turn on the pin cab rails and make sure you can see the rails off to the side, make them visible, true. And when you're calling these out, it's whatever you named it. You may have named it what I've named it. If not, then, make sure you have the name of the rails combined right there, right? That's it for the VR mode. For the plunger, we have some things here. So this is the timers for the plunger, and this is where it says pull the plunger out. And you're going to pull it out as the button is held. It's going to go in increments until it has been pulled out 130. So when I say 130, it says 31 here. But basically, my plunger is in a negative position. So it's actually like negative, 99, I believe. So when this is pulled back up to 31, it's going to stop and it's going to pull it back in increments of 5. All right. So as long as the button is being held down, it's going to pull it back in increments of 5. Then when that timer is over, the timer 2 will tick on. When the button is released, because remember we did it up here for when the button is released, this timer turns on. And this is going to move it back to its original position at a much faster interval, and then it will turn the timer off. All right, so that's that whole cycle. So when you push Push the button down, it's going to come out nice and slow. When you let go, it's going to go back fast. All right. And I copied this. This is all copied from the Iron Maiden table. Here's the beer code. So all of this is randomized, the beer bubbles 1 through 8, and it's just going to randomly choose to go from one position to another position and then pop. All right, it just disappears. Then we have the VR code right here for the clock. And this is actually a really cool little routine where the clock actually rotates based off of real time. So it gets the current time. So it gets the current time for what's on your computer, and then it rotates the minutes, seconds, and hours hand based off of what it is, and then it says show the current time now. So this code was really brilliant. It was really cool. I really enjoy having a clock in there because I know exactly what time it is, and there's the end sub. So with that, we have now covered all of the code. This video is getting kind of long now, and I'm sure that some of you are bored out of your mind by looking at the code. If you have any questions, use those resources that I gave you. The idea is that I want to have a bare bones basic minimal cabinet that has all of this pre-done into it. So we're going to end up doing the number of players in the future, the fleep sounds, and basically get all the basic code to get the table up and running, its start and end. And at that point, that is when we're going to carry over into Project Snow Day and actually do the game specific features and functions and get them all up and running. So we've probably got another 4 or 5 videos of going back and forth between Project Snow Day and doing some other things to get a bare bones basic minimal cabinet set up so that we can use this in several different ways in the future. I hope you learned something from watching this. If you did, please give me a like, please subscribe. It really does help make the channel grow. Thank you again for watching. I'll see you in the next one.